really excited to have you all here today, and we have a really, really fun and engaging presentation with Raquel here, who is awesome, just so kind to extend her time tonight for us. So we have a great talk for you tonight, and we'll have a Q&A portion at the end for people to ask any other questions. And for those of you who are new to our organization, we are QTBIPOC Design, which stands for Queer, Trans, Black, Indigenous, People of Color Design. And we are a space that uplifts queer, BIPOC, folks within the creative industry through mentorship, networking, and educational events such as this we're attending. We have lots of fun, exciting things planned for the rest of the year, as well as 2022. And I'm just so excited for those of you to join us today. We also have another QTBIPOC superstar to help present some work and some life experience as well. And yeah, very new into this space as well. We were founded about a year ago, and so far everything's been going really great with the organization and just folks joining our space. So with that, I have a really great chat with you all tonight. I want to quickly introduce our speaker for the evening. Raquel is an award-winning designer, speaker, and writer, passionate about inclusion, accessibility, and keeping tech human and focused. At least this is what I got from her website. And has previously led design at many great large institutions, both in the corporate space, but as well as the nonprofit and activism space. And I'm just really excited to bring her into this space to share with you all her breadth of knowledge, life experiences, in between. Without further ado, welcome, Raquel.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
As well, stop sharing, and the floor is yours.
All right. I'm going to share my screen. How's everyone doing? I'm so excited to be here, and I love that this group is here, that it exists. I think it's so special, and pumped to be here as a fellow queer person of color and designer. So today I want to talk a little bit about designing for Elizabeth Warren. I had the honor and the exhaustion of getting to serve as her design director for her primary campaign for president in 2019 and 2020. And I'm just going to kind of go over what that experience was like, what we were trying to do there, and what it has looked like for me since that experience to try to continue to be involved in politics and also deal with the aftermath of being involved in politics. And then I'll kind of open things up for a Q&A, but I definitely want to be very, approachable to everyone, answer questions. So feel free to drop things in the chat or even interrupt if you want. And speaking of interrupters, there are 3 cats in this household. One of them, the center one, is mine. Her name is Artie. There's also Kevin on the left and Mr. Chunky Douglas on the right. I cannot guarantee that one or all of them won't just run into this frame at some point. So if you do, go ahead and wave. I also want to acknowledge that I am in Austin, Texas, which is on stolen land from the Tunkala. They lived in Central Texas, as well as the Comanche and the Apaches moved through this area. So acknowledging where we are today. Let's jump in. Design and politics. I've gotten a lot of reactions, and I've told people that I've worked in political design, and a lot of the times people can assume that it's very glamorous, and there's something about it that is, but I want you guys to see what I look like pretty much every day. Not my best, let's say. Very much, in a dark warehouse in the corner of Boston, just wearing my caps and trying to get things done 24 hours a day. And it's a good reminder, I think, that even the most exciting seeming things from the outside are always just experiences from the inside and can also be exhausting as well as glamorous. But moving to just design and politics in general, I think for a long time, the relationship between a political campaign and design has been very much a contractual relationship. And what I mean by that is very much agency driven. And there's been a lot of really amazing work done that way. Some that you may recognize is, AOC's awesome kind of first big run. This work was done by an agency in New York called Tandem. And then also during this primary campaign, an agency called Hyperact did this sort of amazing sort of grassroots design toolkit for Pete Buttigieg. And Blue State Digital is another agency that made the first logo for Warren and some of the first pieces of work for Elizabeth Warren. So very much kind of that old school model of a campaign exists and runs on its own as its own self. A design agency exists and runs on its own as its own self. And they, kind of throw things over the wall to try to get a brand done and get your, message out. But there's also a really amazing kind of legacy, especially in progressive political spaces, of pushing design forward. Obama is kind of hilariously called like the first internet president. And part of that reason is because of when he ran, but part of that is because he was one of the first political candidates to really take technology and design very seriously. And you can see that in like how, big of a splash, if you guys remember, I don't know how old everyone is, but if y'all remember the Shepherd Ferry Hope poster, and I'm sure even now you've seen a million copies of that since. Shepherd Ferry also kind of revisited the style for the Women's March a couple of years ago. The Obama logo was kind of unheard of comparative to previous political logos, very much a word like a graphic mark instead of like a classic sort of serif text. And the Obama administration is one of the first administrations that also brought in a technological expertise and presence to the White House. So there was a kind of digital presence to the White House. He had a creative director, a wonderful woman named Ashley Axios. If you don't follow her work, I recommend it. Enough about Obama, but I will say that there is a really good progressive legacy of taking design and taking technology seriously. And that's something that I really wanted to help bring to the Warren campaign as well. And so one of our main goals coming into that campaign was to switch to having design as more of a collaborative partner, approaching things differently. And that was not just me as the design director, but also kind of partnership with upper leadership, like the chief mobilization officer, whose name is Caitlin Mitchell. She's now running Mobilize, which is a progressive tech org. And the primary goal is to bring design in-house. And that may sound surprising, but sometimes in-house, I think less so these days, but certainly when I was coming up, in-house was thought of as like less prestigious in some ways than agency, especially in the brand sense. But what we were able to do is to kind of push the needle forward on design by bringing things in-house, because we had, this was at the end of the campaign, but look how enormous our team is. We had a team of like, I think up to 11 designers, including sort of illustration and motion and print and UX and all of the different types of design you could possibly need. And because of this, we were able to really reach out to every other team on the campaign and collaborate to be brought into the room sooner and start to have something to say, in the earlier, more strategic parts of deciding, what are we doing? What are we putting out there, instead of, getting a paragraph of text and being asked to put it on Twitter, which sometimes can happen. And, that is an indicator of not the best relationship between the larger political org and their design team, no matter where it situates. It was also allowed us to be so much faster. And as one can imagine, speed is really, really important on a political campaign. So we were able to turn things around, in a matter of hours, because someone could walk over, ask us for it, and we can put it out. So as you can imagine, we did a ton of stuff. And the campaign was longer than 6 months, but 6 months covers about the time since when I joined, inherited about 3 designers, and grew out the design team to what it was at the end when we shut down after Super Tuesday. So just to get a sense, this is kind of a screenshot of some of the slides I put together at the end of the campaign of sort of the design top lines, all of the things that we accomplished that we can talk about moving forward. And also, this is just a short amount of all of the different mini brands that we built. And basically what these are is kind of individual versions of our larger brands that we built for each individual plan. If you know anything about Elizabeth Warren, you know she has a plan. That was her whole thing. And they were really wanting to put out a new plan weekly, if not bi-weekly, as much as possible. And so we got really fast at finding ways to create sort of a system in which each plan could feel like itself and also feel like part of the larger family. And I feel really proud of the work we did. I think we were really successful in doing that. You can see here kind of how differently different plans were able to look while still being in the family. And so, for example, the plan for cannabis and weed obviously brings that green color to the forward, but also kind of pops of our secondary colors. When we wanted to talk about white nationalist violence, we wanted to come with a very different kind of feel. And I very much didn't want it to be kind of traditional expectations of how you would show something, sort of all black and white. I put my foot down and very much did not want to show any sort of harmful imagery, but still give the sense of this is something very serious that we want to talk about. And so we brought in this kind of gritty paint swipe texture that we didn't really use anywhere else, but felt right here. And this like copper color that most of the time was a secondary color, but felt right as kind of not a harsh, angry red, but still like something that you're taking seriously. And then of course, the Blue New Deal is one of my favorite plans. Really amazing, amazing plan by Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who is a climate scientist wanting to augment the Green New Deal with kind of a plan for the oceans as well. She's so smart, highly recommend looking her up. And we got to make a lot of fun little fishies, which any point you can do fishies, you should. That's one of my design principles. Another thing that we were really trying to do is to bring representatives of the artistic community and representatives of our supporters in to do work for us as well. So it wasn't just the in-house design team, but also collaborating with a ton of different artists. And we made a point to only reach out to artists of color and women and non-binary folks, and really to give an opportunity to uplift artists that I admired, artists that were supporters of Warren. And a lot of the times we just came to them and said, like, here's some Warren quotes, but do whatever you want. And we were able to come up with like really fascinating different things. Our first one was, this awesome kind of trio of letterers here on the top left. And then as we went forward, we were able to do even like weirder and weirder stuff. Trap Bob was one of my favorites. They did like all of these wild graphics that we were able to put on our Giphy and then also on different t-shirts. So really good way, I think, to come at design as community as well, at least so we hoped. And part of the way that we were really able to do this was to do a really strong design system. And this is another thing that we're really trying to push on this campaign. Obviously, there are brand systems for hopefully most every brand that you encounter, but I was really hoping to bring a perspective of having worked at IBM and in enterprise and having these very robust component libraries that let us mix and match, as well as kind of, here's our colors and our fonts, and really bringing together that modular aspect as well. And that also allowed us to move very quickly and make really great different styles of work without having to reinvent the wheel every time in like 2 hours when we need it. And so a little bit of a kind of glimpse behind the curtain for that included making time. A lot of my job was making time, which is very hard to do on a campaign, but I thought really valuable. So one of the things we did was to have a weekly meeting where we looked at like literally like every tiny element within our brand system, what it's about, things that we do with it, things that we don't do with it, and how we want to grow it if we want to. And what we were able to do with this is keep growing that brand system and keep staying kind of really fresh with it, really on top of it, and owning it as a living system, as a shared living system amongst the design team, instead of just like one static thing that we're given once and never change. And I thought that also allowed us to really evolve the design over the course of the campaign, which was really cool. We also, you know, one of our first and foremost things that we wanted to be very certain about doing was to bring in accessibility and to really care about accessibility in every element of the campaign. There's a lot of obvious things that we can own as the design team. For example, the color contrast accessibility here, where we went through and really saw like exactly which color combinations of our brand color system fit which kind of standards of the WCAG, as well as the ones that don't pass, so that we shouldn't use them, which was really helpful. We kind of had these printouts everywhere, so you could kind of glimpse it at a glance, and then other teams started asking for them too, because every once in a while they had to throw something out that didn't have time for a designer to look at it, and maybe it was just an email or maybe it was a video, and it, you know, just make sure it's accessible and you're good to go. Again, a big win for the design system, because as long as they're staying within those guidelines, for the most part, you could put things out without necessarily needing a designer on it, unless it was obviously one of the more complex and more interesting projects, like a mini brand for a plan. And so that was cool too, because then my designers could really focus on the work that needed them, instead of having to do like 500 endorsement graphics for one state for a whole day, which sometimes you have to do, but obviously no one's favorite project. We also wanted to really bring in examples on how to use the typography, because it was kind of a complicated typographical system. The original type was drawn from kind of the old school protest posters. I don't know if y'all are familiar with like "I Am a Man" poster from the civil rights movement, "War is Over If You Want It" from John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and a few other kind of old school union posters. You can see that kind of old American wood type inspiration, I think, in the main font, which is ringside. But we also wanted to mix it up with serif, especially for online, reading those long plans. It's really helpful to have a very readable serif for that. And we very purposely picked kind of a serif typeface from a Black American designer, which I thought was really cool. And it's a great font, very easy to use. But we wanted to make sure it really mixed well with ringside, since it is very much like a thick, or really a bold, thin headline font with this like lighter, airier serif font. You can really like make something that feels very off if you're not thinking about your typography well. I'll stop there because I have a problem where I will digress and talk about typography for 3 years, but you know, designer. But yeah, we wanted to give a lot of examples, not just for sort of junior designers, but also for onboarding new designers. And again, to hand off to other teams that don't have designers, or states teams that maybe just have one kind of local to the state volunteer designer, and letting them or helping them to make work that felt of a family with the rest of all of the work. This is really just a point where I get to brag about some of my favorite stuff that we did. I hope you'll indulge me. But what was really cool about what we ended up calling Scrolly Telling, which is really like an interactive digital storytelling piece, similar to what you'll find often on like the New York Times. We really wanted to pitch something that felt like it was a cool new digital thing from a brand or the New York Times, and not from a political campaign. And the best opportunity for that was the ultramillionaire tax, or the wealth tax, that Elizabeth Warren really talked about. And the basic idea is, if you take, you know, the 2 cents off of every dollar above like 500 million, really the most wealthy like not your rich uncle, not even Madonna, like just Bezos level wealthy, you can actually fund a lot of the really popular social policies that the left wants, and hopefully lots of people want. And so we were really trying to tell that story of like, what is wealth and what is like ultra wealth, and what does it mean to tax them? Because those are kind of complex things that we want to really help people understand kind of from the very beginning. And it got a mention from the Center for American Politics and Design, which is awesome. One of my bucket list items. It's still there, by the way, if you ever want to look at it. It's at elizabethwarren.com/wealth-gap. We also were able to expand. Once we built the first Scrolly Telling, we were able to kind of rework that same design work to kind of make her about page much more cool, much more interesting, and also tell the story of where she grew up, the things that she experienced, and the people she met, and how all of those different things have shaped her policies. So when she talks about universal childcare as infrastructure, she can talk about how the only reason she was able to go to college, become a professor at Harvard eventually, is because her Aunt B came over and helped her raise her kids when she had to go through a divorce and be like a single mom. It's kind of amazing, right? These like human stories that are why she cares about these, dense plans that you might not really think about otherwise. I also really wanted to bring in the marriage of illustration and animation. And again, all of these like really beautiful digital first, exciting images and graphic elements that you may not see in a typical political campaign. Again, taking inspiration from sort of media and advertising to bring those techniques into telling our story of our policies. And so we made an ad about toasters and an ad about the Blue New Deal. I think I can play the toaster one a little bit just so you get a sense of the animation. And I want to shout out the illustrator was Grace Abe and the motion designer was Laura Porat. I'll show my whole team and their names in a bit, but just an absolute dream team. And they were able to feed off each other's creative energy in a really great way and tell the story that Elizabeth Warren tells on her campaign trail in a really kind of exciting way.
Let's talk about toasters.
Good.
One
Great.
day as a young mom, I was making toast for breakfast. I got caught up doing 6 other things and totally forgot about the toaster until the bread was literally in flames and my curtains were on fire. Toasters are a lot safer now. That's because a federal agency called the Consumer Product Safety Commission said enough and started requiring timers and automatic shutoffs. Now, you can't buy a toaster that has a 1 in 5 chance of burning your house down. But get this, leading up to the 2008 financial crisis, banks could offer you a mortgage that had a 1 in 5 chance of putting your family out on the street. Predatory loans may not set houses on fire the way a toaster could, but they sure can blow up a family's life. So I had an idea for an agency that would protect families from financial ruin. It was an uphill battle. Some called it an unwinnable fight. Wall Street spent millions lobbying against it, but we got organized, we won, and President Obama signed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau into law. Now, all consumers, whether you're a veteran or a student or caught in the middle of a scam, have a champion in Washington. The CFPB has returned $12 billion directly to consumers who've been cheated. We can make our economy work for working people when we get out there and fight for it.
Super inspiring. I love it when she tells that story. There was also kind of
Donald Trump became president,
I won't show the whole thing, but a Blue New Deal ad as well. And both of these ads actually won Graphis Awards, which is awesome because those are typically reserved for advertising agencies. And so again, really showing what you can do when you bring these techniques over into political design and bring your perspective as a designer, as visual communicators over into a political message that really matters to you. Both of these also, I'll bring them up on my Twitter. They're online, so you can watch them in full if you would like. I also acknowledge that I know that it says CTFB and not CFBB in this file. You know, even moving fast, sometimes we mess up. And of course, you know, modern day campaign needs merch, and we were able to really have some fun with it. I think one of the biggest moments that our campaign kind of made a splash was with the Billionaire Tears mug, which we actually wanted to put out throughout most of the campaign, and finally found the right moment for it when Leon Klosterman, I think was his name. I forget his name, I'm sorry, but he was a billionaire, so whatever. This billionaire cried on TV about the wealth tax plan that I mentioned earlier, and we knew it was the right moment to put out this Billionaire Tears mug. You can also might recognize baby Artie over here with her persist cat collar, absolutely necessary. I agree, Stephen. We also had dog collars and dog bandanas, as you can see over here. And I wanted to bring in a little bit of my experience later on with Ed Markey, who is the senator from Massachusetts. He is the first person ever to beat a Kennedy in Massachusetts, which is awesome. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but it was really bringing the power of grassroots and youth organizing to fight for what you care about. But we were able also to do really fun, cool merch for that, including this great picture of him in his like legacy kicks, like from the 80s. And this shirt with his Boston accent, Tell Ya Father, when he was calling out John K. Kennedy III for, you know, taking money from his dad to win the election instead of actually caring about the things that might get people to want to vote for him. Take that with a grain of salt, that's my bias, but the voters did back me up on that opinion. And let's talk about Liberty Green, which is this, what we named this mint color that was everywhere on the campaign, not seafoam, not pastel green, we named it Liberty Green. And the reason for that is because it was actually taken from a Pantone swatch check of the Statue of Liberty, which I thought was super cool. That was done by Matt Ipcar, who was on the Blue State Digital team and was kind of my mentor throughout the campaign. Really wonderful kind of executive design director. And really what we wanted to do is to bring in a fresh new color to show who we are, show progressivism, and kind of shake up the red, white, and blue. We still had sort of red, but it was a brighter red. We still had blue, and it was kind of a deeper blue than you typically see on like an American flag. And then instead of pure white, we had this Liberty Green color. And the funny thing about it is that this kind of mint was meant to just be a kind of a little spot color, just kind of here and there, like a fun little additional color to brighten up designs. But people just really loved it and gravitated toward it. And like really it was kind of volunteers and organizers who started buying mint green t-shirts and wearing them to events and like painting their nails this color and like really just going wild about it, that we realized like something is really resonating with people about this mint green color, and started to use it more and more and more until it came to really represent our brand. And I thought that was really fun. Hunter Schwartz is a kind of political design blogger. He's a fun read if you're interested in this kind of thing. And he wrote a great little piece about it as well, if you look at that. And yeah, I think kind of an important thing that we all discovered directly after the campaign shut down, like maybe literally a week or two, suddenly we were all in a pandemic, just starting to find out what that looked like, what that meant. And, you know, everything shut down. Typically, our campaign would have sort of pivoted itself to start doing on the ground work for Biden and trying to get, you know, the Democratic nominee elected in really traditional methods, door knocking, volunteering, all of that kind of thing. And suddenly all of that was totally turned off for us. So what do? Well, you have to really trust your digital team, and you have to really start leaning there and realize that, you know, there's this sense of like traditional in politics, like a traditional field organizing, and then this like new upstart of digital organizing. And digital organizing is very much considered sort of the redheaded stepchild. And that priority for the campaigns that really succeeded at the end of the year had to flip. And you really had to bring a lot of the things that we were talking about of like, bringing imagery that was meant to work on social media first instead of on TV. Really thinking about what's going to play on Twitter, what's going to like get onto people's Facebook feeds. You have to start thinking about that and how you're doing your visual communication. And that just became huge in the pandemic. And that was kind of the core philosophy of the Ed Markey campaign. So after the Warren campaign, I was still in Boston, unfortunately. Apologies to any Bostonians. And I saw this great campaign coming up with Ed Markey. And if you don't know who he is, which is fair, he is the less famous senator from Massachusetts. Warren is his colleague. And he is also the less famous co-author of the Green New Deal. So he actually helped author that with AOC. And she does a great job of making it a real conversation. But he is really coming as a great example of a very old school politician who is a liberal, but has deeply evolved based on responding to his constituency. And a lot of that has been responding really well to the youth vote and what the youth vote cares about, which is in large part the climate, but also really important things around sort of course, immigration and Medicare for all, a bunch of really, really progressive policies that he has really evolved to take on and really champion, which I really admire about his campaign. And a lot of how we were able to really succeed, in the middle of a pandemic against a Kennedy was to be digital first and to really, really listen to our youth organizers. And so what I was doing with this campaign was basically volunteer leading their group of all volunteer graphic designers. And that was mostly, kind of design students who were in college and wanted to be involved. But we were also involved with kind of the Sunrise Movement, which is another youth-led climate movement who do amazing digital work. If you don't know who they are, super recommend looking them up. There's this great ad that kind of made a little bit of a shockwave at the time that you can find if you search for the Green New Deal Maker, done by some of the guys from the Sunrise Movement, that kind of remixes some of your expectations of what a political ad should look like and what a politician should say, which I think is great. There's also like just so many weird Twitter accounts and fun random memes, and I would say an older millennial, and so I learned a lot. I learned about, for example, the difference between a thirst trap and a fan cam and a lo-fi edit, which are all forms of videos that you can find online and all distinctly different. There's a really fun interaction where a Politico staffer took this video here with the like glitch text, which was I found out, lo-fi edit of his original kind of 80s congressional ad, set to lo-fi music and glitched out and made to be kind of fun and cool. He called that a thirst trap, and the internet really let him know how wrong he was about what exactly it was. It really cracked me up. Highly recommend looking up the Markey verse even now, because it's not only super fun, but a really great example of how to engage the youth vote and like bring them to actually have an impact in the political sphere. So really cool. There's also kind of some fun, again, I'm bringing back this shirt because there's a lot of fun reactions, because recently the New York Times wrote a piece about a different candidate for mayor. There's another mayor election happening in Boston right now. I support Michelle Wu. If anyone would like to know more about that, happy to talk about it later. But in this mayoral race, there's another Boston candidate who is really using her Boston accent, and they're talking about the Boston accent as an entity in politics, which is really fun. And this shirt that we made during the Markey campaign, when he kind of had a great debate moment talking about, tell your father, John Kennedy, just the second to stop, putting a bunch of his family money into the campaign. The shirt kind of took off in other ways as well. We even got sort of a house speaker in trouble because he took a picture with someone who had a shirt that said "Tell Your Father" on it and didn't realize that it was a criticism of John Kennedy III. So memes can have political impact, and if you have, skills, I would even say, in memes, you can use those. Like, I want people to realize that you don't have to like be a policy memer on the Hill to have an impact in politics. You can literally do it by trolling Twitter. And there's a lot of really great people who have done exactly that. Finally, I think it's really important to remember that the way to really win a campaign, I think, is to, meet young people where they are and bring your values. The reason Ed Markey was able to do all of this meme stuff is because he let his youth organizers do it. He didn't sit there and try to do, Pokemon go to the polls. If you guys remember that from Hillary Clinton, if you're faking it, or if you're just like trying to force yourself into something you're not, you're, obviously going to come off as inauthentic. It's not going to work. What really matters is that you're fighting for the things that people care about and letting them bring their own way of fighting for it themselves. Yeah, very cringe. Finally, I want to kind of give a moment to really shout out my amazing design team, because I'm telling this story right now, but it is not all me. And in fact, it's only maybe 10% me. It's mostly the absolutely incredible design team that I was able to hire and kind of let do their thing. Elizabeth Warren has this great thing that she always says, which is personnel is policy. It really matters who you hire and who you have working for you and who you have working beside you. And when you guys become hiring managers in the future, I hope you keep that in mind. When you're trying to decide, what design job to take, even if it's not in politics or nonprofits, look around, see who's going to be around you, because that will be kind of the biggest indicator of whether you'll be successful and also whether you'll be happy. So finally, just want to shout out my team. Had these amazing designers. I had 3 senior designers who were different platform leads. So Judy owned print, Eric owned social media, Stacy owned ads, and then Victoria was my superstar UXer who owned pretty much all of web. Absolutely incredible. Grace was my illustrator. Laura was my motion designer. I had a couple of mid-level designers, Colleen and Riz. They're especially a great story to me because Colleen went on to be the design director for the Ossoff campaign, and Riz went on to be the lead designer for the Sunrise Movement. So really awesome to see kind of my mid-level designers go on, learn so much that they were able to lead their own teams in the next round. My associate designer was Morgan Cersei, and my design intern was Emily, who is now working at Stark, which is a really awesome accessibility plugin that I just can't say enough good things about. So really important people to keep an eye on, get to know, and see what they're doing next, because they're all gonna, keep doing amazing things. And finally, I was in kind of a sad place when the campaign ended, because Super Tuesday was an unmitigated disaster for sure. And then, a couple weeks later, it's a pandemic and the Bernie campaign shuts down, and I kind of lose hope for, from my perspective, a progressive voice in the White House. And it seems really hard to be able to organize to get Biden in the White House. And I'm feeling, this is me, but I'm feeling ambivalent about him, because I've been fighting for all of these policies that he's unsure about. But I sat down and I said, listen, I have a little bit left inside of me and I need to do something. And I can't door knock physically, can't be going door to door. And also it's not one of my primary skills, despite the fact that I'm giving this talk today, mostly a shy introvert and not really great on my feet in terms of answering political questions. But what I was able to do was to kind of partner up with developers and try to kind of do some different things, make a relational voting app. I made this kind of vote with group where different kind of, I wouldn't say celebrities, but like known influencer level type individuals can ask their followers to make a pledge to vote with them, and then gives all these sort of instructional support, how to vote in your state, when to do it, how to register, all of that good stuff that can get in the way. So I say this to say, like, find the space that needs you, even if it's not your job, and find small ways to bring those skills that you all have as designers, and most importantly, our perspectives as queer, trans, Black, Indigenous people of color. I don't need to tell anyone that there aren't enough people with our perspectives in politics, but it's growing. And the more pockets that we find to push ourselves in there, the better, because it is a perspective that is desperately needed. And lastly, I do want to say that fighting for a better world applies to campaigns too. What I mean by that is that join a union and join campaigns that have unions. And even though you're on a campaign and there's this expectation to work 20 hours a day and do everything you possibly can, because it is a mission that you believe in and it isn't your typical full-time job, it's still important to take care of you and take care of yourself as a worker, even on a campaign. This is something that, again, a meme account, right, on Twitter called Organizer Memes has been really championing in a way that's really admirable to me, because if we're fighting for a better world on campaigns, on nonprofits, even just, you know, in a startup that wants to improve lives for people, we have to start with fighting for ourselves too. And we have to live our values inside of our own organizations. And I think this is super important because it is a recipe for burnout. You know, there's this great writer called Anne Helen Peterson. She wrote a big book on millennial burnout that came out, I think, last year. And she talks about how, you know, you have this like cool job, right? You have this passion job, but the kind of double-edged sword about that is it's a really easy way to be exploited because you care so much. You're not going to say no. You're not going to set down the same kinds of boundaries that you would for, you know, a retail job if you have the ability to set those boundaries, right? And so that happens a ton, especially the younger folks on campaigns and in the field. And I'm really happy to see people like Organizer Memes and other kind of progressive campaign workers fighting back to really establish, you know, better working conditions even in progressive spaces. And so as you all go out, if you are inspired to involve yourselves in politics, I want to remind you that you can also not only bring your voice and your perspective as QTBIPOC designers, but also as workers. And I encourage you to do that. Thank you so much. I will finally stop talking now.
That was so good. So much relevant advice, and just I'm so blown away by, let me add myself to the screen. Just so blown away by just the beautiful work and just also just honoring other people on your team. I think is a practice that I don't see that often, and I just really appreciate you taking the time to do so. And yeah, just phenomenal stuff. And
Thank you.
yeah, and as a QT/BIPOC leader in the design space, you know, again, there's not that many of us in the space. And I think what you're also doing is just really pushing the boundaries of our expectations and where we can go. And so just from the community, just thank you so much for representing us in such an amazing, powerful way.
Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate that.
Yes. And we have plenty of time for questions. I have some I wrote down that I was like burning, but want to also provide the space for folks who want to ask questions as well. If there's anything that you want to ask, you can also feel free to message me anonymously, or just like on your own if you want it to be asked anonymously too, if you're shy. But yeah, we'll give everyone a few minutes, just like think about questions that you may want to ask. So let me start off with maybe some that I wrote down. The first one is just around process. I know you talked a little bit about fonts. I'm also very obsessive with fonts myself. And I'm always curious of just like, what is your process of finding the right typography and just all the bits and pieces that go into making a brand?
Yeah, I mean, huge question. Luckily, I had a really solid foundation to build on from Blue State Digital. When they kind of made the Warren logo mark, they brought in all of this awesome inspiration that I mentioned from sort of early Americana and civil rights protests. And actually, something I didn't mention is also Wonder Woman and early comic books, which is where we got kind of the halftone, which I really love that texture that we used as a tiny, tiny nod to another powerful woman leader in cartoons. And so really when I came in, you know, the brand system was the three colors, the blue, the red, and the Liberty green, ringside as a font, and halftones. And that was what we had to use. And we got pretty far with that, but it did get to a point where we were doing so much work and we really needed more to work with. And so there was a whole process of gathering colors, again, from that same kind of source of inspiration, looking back through also FDR, a lot of the old FDR print work, because with his New Deal, he kind of had a huge progressive revitalization of the American economy post the Great Depression. And Warren takes a lot of inspiration from him as a former politician in that sense. And so yeah, going back and looking at those things, thinking about what else we can bring in and pulling out colors, and then really being intentional again about making sure those colors work in a lot of different contexts in enough accessible contrast. And then the secondary font was also, we really got to a point where we just had this like bold all caps font for everything we were doing. And there's a lot of shouting in politics. It's true, like that did us a lot, but it did seem like we were just shouting in every piece of work. And we needed to bring a little bit more emotional nuance, especially as we started to talk about more things like foreign policy or even telling more of Warren's personal stories. And so the practical aspect of wanting a font people could read the plans on the website and a font where we could whisper, you know, or at least talk in a normal voice, you know, an inside voice as well as just shouting, led us to looking for a good serif. And then from there, I really wanted to get an American designer, and I really wanted to get a typographer who wasn't a cis straight white man, and really bring that representation in the same way that we were trying to do with the artist collaborations. And that's how I found the typographer that built Freight Text. And tried out a few other fonts as well, some great sort of indie woman designer typographers as well, but that is the one that really just felt right. You know, there was like a whole week or two of just a million screenshots and random Figma designs and like trying to see how things looked. And eventually the whole team got to a point where we were like, this is it, like this feels right. And that was pretty much the process in general. I think it's very similar to your typical process, just probably a lot faster by necessity. Again, just really trying to be intentional about who we were as a team, who we are as a campaign, and like falling in with kind of Warren's ideals about what America could look like and for whom. I especially wanted to be as inclusive as I possibly could. And I think I didn't miss the highest mark that I could have, but I think I was able to really push it forward in a way that I hope was somewhat successful.
Yeah, just one more add-on question to that. I think it's beautiful that you're doing the due diligence work of looking at who creates the typography. And sometimes we can create really beautiful, accessible stuff. And what we don't realize is just this entire system of different, tools and different pieces that we use. Sometimes we continue to uplift certain communities more than others, and we continue to perpetuate in the work. I'm just curious, what helped you to actually find fonts and typographies? Because sometimes even font collectives are just very white themselves, very cis, white, hetero. It's like most of font creators look exactly the same. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I was just going to say, you know, there was a rule on the campaign where any merch or print that we did had to be with the union shop because we strongly supported unions as a campaign. And I wanted to just take that principle and expand it towards like exactly like who are even the typographers that we're giving attention and uplift to, who are the artists who we're collaborating to. And frankly, like partially I'm lucky because I have been a queer person of color in the design space for a long time, and I have faves that are my people, or like I was really able to bring like a list of illustrators that are all like people of color and women because I already had people I loved. With typography, it was a little bit trickier, and honestly it came down to just research. I had like 50 tabs of fonts that I thought were nice, and the first step was like, well, is this a decent serif? And the second step was who made it? And sometimes I couldn't find it, and I had to like eliminate those too. And also like searching Twitter for indie typographers was actually really helpful. Twitter is a like hellscape, but it also can be very helpful, especially in these instances. Another like great moment of kismet was when this great hashtag came across my feed just as I was trying to find an illustrator for Black Heritage Month, and it was Black Artists Create, I think was the hashtag. And so I was able to just scroll through the whole hashtag and try to find illustrators whose style fit what we were trying to do and reach out. And that was honestly luck. So it's a little bit about intention, a little bit of like just elbow grease research, and a little bit of luck.
Love that. It looks like we have a question from Aria. Aria, do you want me to ask, or do you want to ask the question? We can spotlight you.
I guess I could ask. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes,
okay.
We can.
Okay, so my question was what was it like bridging workflows of people on the team doing graphic assets and those doing more like the UX and website based things, and if there were any challenges surrounding like getting people to sort of follow similar ways of working, if there are any challenges around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there is like, you're hitting on the very big truth. There's like a huge difference between kind of sitting down and doing UX work and putting out like 5 graphics on social. And I kind of bridged that into a few ways. One, again, the design system really helped. In addition to the design system, I was also critiquing and approving every single piece of design that went through my team. And so I was pretty much able, you know, to act as the catch of like, hey, this is actually a little off brand, or like, I actually saw a different designer solve this problem like this, like, would this help? Especially for the more visual UX things, you know, some of the web pages are basically big advertisements in a sense as well, just for a plan or an endorsement. And so that helped a lot. And then I also, you know, my UXer, Victoria, again, just a superstar. And she was really cool because she kind of acted as the liaison between the design team and the technology team. So half of the time she was collaborating with the graphic designers, and half of the time she was over on the other side of, like, literally the other side of the office with the tech team, like collaborating with the developers. And I think that really helped a lot too, because she was able to come back and be like, hey, they're struggling with this, this, and this, like, can we find a different way of doing this visual, or vice versa? And I also really wanted to keep things open and not just silo people on different things. Even though she was like the UXer, she also contributed to like several different visual campaigns. If she was interested, a couple of times I let, you know, if we had a little bit more time, I did this thing where teammates who wanted to could just pitch an idea, and then we all showed it to each other, voted anonymously, and went with whoever like won the vote. And so she actually won a couple of those and did one of my favorite actual endorsement campaigns, which was the Women's Wave, which were all of the women that won a seat in office after Trump was elected as part of that kind of progressive wave, who endorsed us, and she did like the mini brand for all of that. I digress. But anyway, I think it was really helpful to like not keep the UXer in the corner as well. And even like a few of my graphic designers had some web experience and could come in and help her if she had a bigger project, or like just give a different perspective, really keeping those walls open. But for the most part, I let her own her process, and she was able to like kind of be this sort of bridge. And then I was kind of the the filter on top to just make sure that everything that's going out from the campaign hits all of the approvals and matches the design system. So I had by far the most boring job of the whole group. Did that answer your question? I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. It just like reminded me of like sort of what I do day to day at the, I'm technically a visual designer by title, but I kind of dip and dabble with like development stuff, graphic stuff. And since it's a small agency, I kind of do everything. So everything you said just really resonated with me. So thank you.
Awesome. I'm glad. Great.
Thank you, Aria. And then we have another question from Shelly. Shelly, would you like to ask, or do you want me to ask it on your behalf?
Oh, yeah, I guess I can ask it. So
Sure.
yeah, so speaking of like your design system, so I just wanted to like learn a little bit more about like how your team like actually went about establishing the design system. Like I know you took the big lead on that, but I'm wondering if you had any more collaborative aspects to it, such as was it like one person just taking the lead and trying to figure out everything, or was it more of like people getting together and trying to agree on things from time to time? I kind of asked just because I'm currently trying to establish a design system myself and running into questions of getting started in the right places.
Yeah, cool. I'll try to be helpful. I do think it was very helpful to like kick off the design system and have that base for it to have been led by, again, Matt Evkar at Blue State. He really owned that process and then brought collaborators in until they were ready to like really finalize it. However, once it got to me and my in-house team and we were expanding it, I let it be a lot more organic. I did mention we had those weekly meetings to kind of revise and review the design system. And that really started out just because I was onboarding and I was like, tell me about all the choices you made that I wasn't here for. And then that kind of became a natural progression into like, okay, what choices do we want to make next? And from there, like it really was up to, one designer was really into typography. So he would bring up a lot of typographic stuff. And often it would, I would put it on him to propose options. Another designer kind of came up with different ways of building out the halftone and eventually like clarifying the illustration style. And it was really just like, what were people into? What were people thinking about? And who stepped up to like work on things? And then again, when I finally hired an illustrator and a motion designer, they owned sort of their standards. So the illustrator created her own illustration style standards based on what we had built already and how she wanted to expand it. And then the motion designer kind of worked with the video team to really delineate how things moved. So I don't know how helpful that is for starting up. I think what I would say is like have a decider, especially when you're starting, because you could get stuck designing by committee forever. But then after a while, you can kind of relax those standards and let people own what they're passionate about. And I think that makes a stronger system, and like really having a way for even people that aren't on the system team. We didn't have one, but a lot of places do contribute and find ways to kind of bring up like different usages or different needs and not just like keep it in a tower. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. Sorry, do you mind if I like just tack on one more like question? I think I forgot to ask in the first place, but like just as you were building it out, like were you rolling it out like gradually, the design system, or like was it like you were building it along the way and just people were adopting it along the way as well, and they had to make changes along the way? Okay.
Yeah, I was mostly along the way, but we did for major things like the secondary font and the secondary colors. We had like a moment where like, okay, like we are basically publishing version 2 to everybody. Here's what we've decided. Here's how, like, here's examples how we want to use. Come to us with any questions. Like things that I think were bigger or trickier. We had those kind of mini launch moments. Otherwise, like it was like we decided to only use the green border on these types of plans, like that kind of stuff. We just decided as a team and like did, you know.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. That was actually super, super helpful. And I think I'm
Oh,
gonna
good.
try to bring those things back to, I guess, for
Wonderful.
tomorrow.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
Mhm.
And when in doubt, just comp it out, right? When in doubt,
Mhm.
put things together. And sometimes with branding, you never know what you're going to get until you just throw things together. Maybe mock up a web page, mock up merchandise, mock up all the different things that it would touch. So you're able to pressure test if the brand can be viable. Because that's sometimes where I see a lot of the waterfall style design systems fall apart, is so much thought into the typography, colors, all these things. But as soon as the kind of the artifacts of what you create with it goes beyond the bounds of what was expected, for example, going from web to apparel, for example, or web to print, or print to web, there's this difficulty of sometimes extending patterns and extending backgrounds and stuff like that. And so it's just exactly. It's just like, what is this big kind of this eagle-eye view of all the, even the possibilities of where it's going to touch, and then using that as a way to help pressure test some of the, even the edge cases that might come up.
Yeah, Stephen, I love that.
Yeah.
I pulled up here the screenshot of the brand overview just as a small example if people want to look of like we have this like green emphasis border. There are don'ts, like we don't use it when we're doing full breeds or print at home because it would also have a white border outside it. Like definitely, like we started creating rules based on things that we saw in the different mediums that worked or didn't. So highly agree. +1.
Yes. And I absolutely love your creative process too, where you're gathering so many inspirations from disparate pieces that, and oftentimes, for example, I see digital teams as they're creating digital projects will look at other websites as case studies. And sometimes we're so overtly prescriptive with where we're getting our inspiration from that oftentimes we sometimes totally forget about what we're truly inspired by, what we're truly moved by. And just like how we create a vision board, we can totally do the same with a brand or a project, and just get the little bits and pieces of things that inspire you, whether they're illustrations or movements or organizations. Like you've highlighted, Raquel, there's so many bits and pieces, or even like magazines and comic books that we can pull little bits of inspiration from. And the way I also like to think about it too is it's just like a pot, right? We have to let it simmer. We have to just let all of those ingredients simmer, and then sometimes what we get out of it is something that we wouldn't have expected.
Yeah, it's definitely a way of bringing fresh blood into what you're designing, and you're not just, it's almost like artifacting a JPEG, you know, like you design off a website, and you just like get lost instead of bringing in new things. I love that point.
Yes. I know some designers I've worked with too are really inspired by Pantones and the names of the Pantone colors too. And so sometimes like I worked with this one designer who literally had the Pantone book and would flip through it and just see what would come up to him as he was looking at the different colors. And it was just an interesting perspective too of utilizing all the different pieces and being inspired in a way that was different. Do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to ask it for you?
Yeah, it's just really quick. Like, you know, do you have your design system published online somewhere? Because, you know, as a designer, I would love to just take a look at other people's design systems?
Yes, I do. And let me copy this link for you and share it. It's just in a Google Doc for a as a shareable thing, and hopefully you guys can access it. But yeah, I'll definitely share it. Would love any thoughts on it, even at this stage, because you're always learning. But yeah,
that's
enjoy.
awesome. Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. And thank you for the presentation. It's really great, like inspiring things to think about.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for sharing that.
It says we need access.
Oh, they might have shut
Request
down
access.
the access.
Okay. All right.
I'll follow up and see if somebody somewhere will give me a little bit of limited access for y'all. And if so, I'll tell Steven. But unfortunately, the nature of politics.
Any other questions? I have some questions related to our community, especially, doing this work, just overall the broader realm of digital design is very cis, hetero, white centric. And my question is just how, what, I'm trying to verbalize it. What has helped you to navigate it, especially as a QTBIPOC leader in this space? And what are some things that just have come up for you that you've learned more about, whether it's your identity or just the way you collaborate, work with people, and just hold yourself in these spaces?
Yeah, that's a huge question, and I won't answer adequately, but I do think the number one thing is community. And so you guys are all, sorry, y'all, I'll just use my Texas roots to good here. Y'all are all a step ahead being a part of this. I think very much, especially my early days in tech, I made a point to go to a lot of events like Lesbians Who Tech that not only were full of lesbians, which is always a great place to go, but also they were very intentional about not just being white cis lesbians in tech, and really making sure that their events are as diverse as anybody would want them to be, and as their community is. And really just finding technologists and designers that were doing the kinds of things I wanted to do, that I could reach out to, or that I could just watch. And that kept me going for a long time, I think something that I've learned really in the past couple of years as well is, I've been a bit of a passionate hothead my whole life, and I've put a lot of my energy into the things that I care about, especially in terms of making the world I want to see, and fighting for accessibility, fighting for diversity, fighting my, often leadership of whoever I'm working for to do better. And I don't regret that. I value very much that part of who I am, but I do think I definitely hit a wall at one point, and I realized that I was giving more than I was being given, and I couldn't do it anymore. And I had to learn that it was okay, and when it was okay to just step back and decide I don't have to fight this battle, and I'm disappointed that no one else is, and I'm going to come back and have something to say about that, but maybe not right now. Maybe right now it's okay to go home at 5 and care about something other than my work, and play with my cat, and hang out with my girlfriend, and draw and read, and watch 6 episodes of Buffy. That's okay too. And it sounds really trite, but honestly, that has been the biggest lesson of the pandemic for me. You're not failing if you're not fighting 100% of the time. And in fact, you might be failing yourself if you are fighting 100% of the time. Rest is just as important and worth prioritizing. And that's why I always put this mention at the end of this talk to organize in your nonprofits and your campaigns, join unions, go work for places that treat you well. And if they don't, and you can, you don't have to fix it. You can just leave. And I think that's a huge thing that I learned is even if it's only been 3 months, if it's really completely awful and you don't see it improving and you can't fix it, leave. It's okay. Like, you'll be okay. And it's honestly a huge investment in yourself. That was me talking to myself. But yeah, I think that is also something really important that I've learned, and acknowledging that like sometimes we have to stay in a job to have the job, but even then, like, you can do the bare minimum for a while too, and that's still okay. And that's in fact great if that's what you need.
Yes, and just echoing Aria, 1 million claps to all of that. It's just, it cannot be said enough how important rest is. An Instagram account I've been following and loving lately has been the Nap Ministry. I don't know if anyone follows it here.
Yes, they're
led
wonderful.
by amazing Black
So good.
woman that centers this concept of rest in the concept of race and socio dynamics as a way to protest against industrialization of labor. And especially when it comes to, for myself, I think it's really easy. I catch myself when I create these narratives, right? Oh, I shouldn't leave a job so soon. Oh, you know, if I'm the leader, I have to do X, Y, Z, all these things. And oftentimes we forget where these narratives come from. And I think it just is really up to us to, as a part of our decolonizing efforts, to walk back and fight against some of these narratives that have been put upon us, implanted in us, that ultimately don't care about our social welfare, because it helps support this larger system of overwork, underpaid, under-recognized labor. And yeah, beautiful, beautiful projects that they even put on too. And there's a project they recently had where it's like art installation. Do you see that one where they just set up a bed and had Black folks come sleep in the bed, paid them to sleep in the bed, and had a whole community around it, really thinking about ways to create an art installation that was impactful, plus also equitable for the community. And so,
Cool.
yeah, it's, I'm right there on the same page with you, Raquel. It's taken me a long time to figure out this importance of rest and stepping away.
Yeah. And I feel that we are in an era or a period of rest as necessity, not just because of what we've all been through. Like, we need to grieve and we need to heal, but also because we are going to be asked a lot as things come, and we should be ready for it. And that requires rest as well.
Exactly. And the statistic that I like to go back to is The Advocate recently published a month or two ago that 33% of Gen Z identify as queer, non-heteronormative. Yes.
You'd love to see it.
Yes. And if we look at the US Census, it's about 4 or 5%. And so it's like 29-30% difference. It could be even bigger than that, greater than that. And as we start to unravel and dismantle some of these structures, we're recognizing that the future is a lot more queer than we realize. A lot less of this structured binary form of existing. And I forgot where I was going with this. I think it might come back to me. But it's just this concept that, oh, going back to what you mentioned, like, we're going to be front and center and utilized by so many organizations. As our population continues to grow, a lot more organizations are going to reach out to us, want to partner with us, want to work with us. But we should stand our ground and ask for our worth, because we are basically the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to share, this is actually from a different talk, but it's another thing that I have been thinking a lot about and that I've used as a leader in tech and design as a framework to think about how I want to approach work. And it's essentially an anti-capitalist framework, or at least I'm trying to make it. And so basically, when I think about like the levers of capitalism, and this is from obviously like Marx and Chomsky and all those white dudes, but basically described as like individual competition. So it helps, you know, for workers to be fighting each other, to incentivize self-exploitation, honorable or a badge of honor to like work harder than you should or more hours than you're being paid for, to privatize socially produced goods, so not to have people share things as a collective, and to reduce the dignity of work. And so when I think about these things, I think about like, how can I come with the opposite of that to the way that I work? And what that looks like for me, at least, if I'll, keynote will let me go to the next slide here, is instead of individual competition, to really prioritize collaboration, to really share credit, which you'll, like you saw it, like I shout out my team and I do it because they're awesome. And I also do it because, again, I want it to feel like we have an embarrassment of riches. We're not competing for greatness here. And of course, transparency and open communication. So I'm not hoarding things in order to get ahead, whether that's information or skills or anything. Incentivizing self-exploitation, like I will not work after like my work hours, and I get mad if I'm a manager at my reports who do. And it's important to fight against those examples too. Take your vacation. If you're in an agency, like just bill 40. Like you don't need to tell them that you spent 15 minutes looking at Twitter and put that in your timesheet. Like don't let your manager tell you to do. That is another personal experience. And instead of socially produced goods, this is like more about kind of software teams, but let the teams that are building the thing own their own decisions and take feedback from the people who will be using the thing, and like totally up in the triangle of power from the CEOs and the stakeholders saying like, this is what everybody wants, to instead like, here is directly what we've heard the people we're serving needs and what we're going to build because of it. And we're just letting you know. That's again, really hard in like different organizations, but I think that's another really like much better model of work. And finally, to like help bring back more dignity, find ways to maximize creativity, allow for time for play, allow for time for inspiration, exploration, and allow for time to like do things that aren't necessarily like work related, especially like in the design space and a creative space. This is something that we can really own, is like creativity comes from so many different places and inspirations, and sometimes you have to like be fiddling or bored, and that's when like something interesting happens. And if you can make and build the space for yourself to have that, you're going to be able to be so much more creative than you like would have thought you had, like could be able to, especially if you like have to be outputting something or doing something relevant at every moment. And of course, like refusing unethical business goals, you know, there's a whole larger conversations about like the consequences of like attention algorithms, for example, or, you know, contracting with ICE for another example that I won't get into, but obviously another great way to like, again, like bring dignity and also like positive impact to the work that you're doing. So random digression here, but it felt relevant. So I wanted to share.
Good. This is so good. Yeah.
Thank you.
And all of this makes me think about one word that pops up to my mind, is just this aspect of sustainability. Sometimes we fail to recognize, you know, oh, I'll just do that one thing, or doing this and squeezing that out and doing this. And we oftentimes forget the precedents that we set in doing that work. So just like the whole concept, going back to the word boundaries, when we keep pushing this line little by little by little, we end up pushing ourselves to a place that becomes totally unsustainable. What started off as 5 minutes after work now turns into 5 hours after work. And it becomes the expectation, right? Then the norm. And at the end of the day, a big part of, at least my reckoning, I don't know if this is yours as well, Raquel, but it's coming to realize that I'm just a human being. I am, you know, I need sleep, I need to rest, I need to take breaks. I can't work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the closer I am with the humanity of myself, allows me to have more compassion and more grace with my work. And that has been really the key pillars to help me establish boundaries and expectations. Because
I love that.
what, yeah, because sometimes it's what people are trying to fight us with are like this game of logic sometimes, right? It's like logically, no, it's like 5 minutes, or don't you want to be better? Or the concept of hustle culture, hustle, work hard. And it's just, we can't fight ourselves in the game of logic sometimes with this, because the whole structure is so illogical. But yeah, it's just, I think this is so good. We all need to make this a poster, print it out, put it on walls.
Sorry, it's not beautifully designed yet, but please screenshot away. Yeah, your point about logic, I wanted to say, something that I've mentioned in chat. I've been reading this book called The Queer Art of Failure, and something that he talks about is like how we accept things as rational, but they aren't actually. We just have all decided and accepted it is. And that like sustainability is a perfect metaphor for that too, because okay, so as a metaphor, the sustainability of forests, there was a long time where people thought in forestry that like the best way to have a strong, healthy forest is to kill everything else in the forest and only have like one crop of timber. And you have that one perfect crop of timber, and then you have the timber. And what ended up happening is that like actually destroyed the forest, killed the ground. And in farming, like it's called monoculture, like you burn out basically the ground, right? Like you get to a point where there's no more nutrients. And the reality was that like forests are one of the most incredible like self-connected organisms of symbiosis, and like you can nerd out forever. Highly recommend if you're interested to like read out about it. But the forests need every element, including like the decaying logs and the fungi and the like birds and whatever. And like imagine telling a tree like it's illogical for you not to be in a perfect row of all timber with nothing else. Like we invented that logic, and it is highly illogical from a like forced perspective to ever try to do that. Like if a tree could speak back, it would be like, you're crazy, you're killing me and you're killing the ground. And I think we can apply that to ourselves too. Like this sense of outside like expected structural logic is actually not logical or rational at all. And to try to treat a human being and a complex like social organism as an automaton is frankly absurd.
Absolutely. Yes. And Aria also wrote adopted scheduling, working blocks and breaks in the work calendars to create this symbiosis, right? This diversity within our day. We have to eat. We have to go to the bathroom. We need to breathe. We need to walk,
You need to look at the sky. Yeah. I love that.
Exactly. And a question that I'm just like overtly rational sometimes, logical, and a question that's helped me kind of fight some of these things, these irrational thoughts, is asking myself, in this situation or in this pattern, who truly benefits the most? And we can even apply that in this structure where, for example, individual competition, incentivized self-exploitation, asking ourselves, who benefits the most in the system by doing it? And even hustle culture, thinking, okay, but who truly benefits the most within the system? It's when we're a piece of this puzzle that uplifts these larger forces or these larger services that depend on people to be hustling, to be using services. And yeah, sometimes I have a whole list. I actually have like questions and statements that kind of help me break out of this pattern. Sometimes we just need that little kick in the jolt. Oh, what's this?
I feel like you're giving this other talk for me.
Oh, yeah. We're like symbiosis.
So good. Yeah, like this is the one I should have given maybe. But I love this. This is a reporter that posted this. Like, what is the machine that did this to this person? And the like larger question is like, what does the system value? And like under that is like, who's left out, who's benefiting. I think those are just some of the most powerful questions that we can ask anything. I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my friends who's a psychiatrist has a saying where we're all hallucinating. We're all seeing reality in the way that we see it. And when some of our realities align, we call it, or some of our hallucinations align, we call it reality. And oftentimes we over-index on when too many people have a shared hallucination, and then we say that this is reality as it is. And yeah, it's this whole like very meta conversation around just like what is real and what is not real. And yeah, sometimes I like to think now it's just the least attached we could be to things. And this is also very Buddhist in a way, where the less attachment we have to things allows us to be more open to what we haven't seen yet, what we haven't experienced yet, and a future that we don't quite know just yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I
these are
accidentally
great
got to this
resources.
slide, but someone in chat wanted to see it, so I thought I'd share. It's by no means complete, and I would love recommendations to add to it as I continue to build my case against tech capitalism in my own mind.
Well, the book that we're doing as a part of our book club, we just finished reading Design Justice, or we're continuing in the next 2 months. That one just, I think, sets really great principles of just perspectives into design and design culture. And a big part of the book is dedicated also to proper accreditation and credit as a form of protesting in the system where it's one winner take all, which is really fascinating. Also, Ruined by Design, that's another book that's really great. And that talked about ICE and how Microsoft has contracted out with them to create that.
Typing for myself.
Yeah.
This is great.
And yeah, I think the more examples that we can arm ourselves with of how design has been exploited as a practice to do these things, also, at least for myself, a good reminder that if we don't check ourselves, we end up playing into the system that can potentially truly harm and hurt people and communities. Yes. Yeah. So, last question I have for you. How can people follow you? What is the best way to continue following your work and all that you're doing?
Yeah, I have spent too much time on Twitter, and I'm just gonna own that. So pretty much if you ever want to chat or reach me, you can @ me. My Twitter is Raquel Designs, but I'll type it in as well. Oh no,
I got
you're ahead
you.
of me. Love it. Yeah, that's really the main way, but you can also, always, if you prefer, you can email me. I'll put it in the chat here. I'm now on the QTBIPOC Design Slack, so feel free to hit me up there as well. And yeah, my website is raquelbreternitz.com. It's pretty boring, but there is an Easter egg of my cat if you can find it.
Challenge accepted.
Right. It's not that hard, but it does make me happy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Raquel.
everyone.
Quick little announcements from our end. Since it's short, I won't hop into the slides, but we have a next UX night happening in November, which is all about money, how to write up contracts, how to write up different things to help situate your business, your creative business in an equitable fashion. And then we have our Slack that we have attendees join from our community. It's a totally safe space. We only allow in QTBIPOC folks, so not that much activity, but in a way, feel free to ask any question. You're going to have everyone answer it, which is really nice. And with that, yeah, if you haven't joined yet, Kenny has posted the link into our chat with the application to fill out your information so we can send you the details. And with that, we wrap up for the evening. Such a heartwarming talk with the community. And thank you, Kenny. Yeah, looking forward to having future conversations. Raquel, we have to bring you back in the future, have another talk with our group. And yeah, I'm sure it's not just me, but I speak on behalf of everyone here. Thank you again for the work that you do and really helping set a precedence, especially as a creative leader in this space, with things that we want to see more of. And so much appreciation.
Thank you so much. This is such a special space, and I'm glad I was able to be a part of it today, and I will definitely be around the SAC, so we will not be strangers.
Yes, yes. And so with that, we close for the evening. Everyone, have a good rest of your night. Take care, rest up, and have a great rest of your week. Until next time.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.